Good morning, good afternoon, and or evening, old and new viewers. I am Brenna Victoria. Today on episode 5 of the American Mafia, we will be talking about the Gambino crime family. The Gambino crime family is part of the big 5 families of the American Mafia. The Gambino group's operations extend from New York and the eastern seaboard to California. Its illicit activities include labor and construction racketeering, gambling, loan sharking, extortion, money laundering, prostitution, fraud, hijacking, and fencing. But the family was one of the 5 that was founded after the Castellammarese War of 1931. They dominate organized crimes in New York City, United States. They already gone through 5 bosses between 1910 and 1957. They are named after Carlo Gambino, who was boss of the family at the time of the McClellan hearings in 1963, when the structure of the organized crimes first gained public attention. Its most prominent member during this time was the underboss Albert Anastasia, who rose to infamy as the operating head of the underworld's enforcement arm, Murder Inc. Now, you may remember the name Murder Inc. I spoke about Murder Inc. in a previous video. And if you want to stop watching this video and watch Murder Inc., you're more than welcome to. Anyways, but Albert took over his family in 1951 after murdering the family's founder, Vincent Mangano. The group was then reorganized and renamed the Anastasia crime family. After the rise of what was the most powerful crime family, an assassination was planned. While minding his own business one day, Anastasia decided that it would be a great idea to go to the barbershop that was situated in the Park Sheraton Hotel in Manhattan to get a shave and a haircut. And it was there that Mr. Anastasia would lose his life. He was sitting in the barbershop chair when a shot rang out as everyone scrambled to safety. The bodyguards rushed to Mr. Anastasia to safety, but it was then that they realized he was dead. But who would want to kill him? There was no known person they could really think that would want him dead. But experts say it was Anastasia's own underboss, Carlo Gambino, who helped with the assassination so that he could rise to power and take over the family. Gambino then partnered up with Meyer Lansky to control gambling interests in Colombia. Throughout 1976, the Gambino family's wealth grew. It was around this time that Gambino decided that he was going to appoint his brother-in-law, Paul Castellano, as boss, should it be that he would be assassinated or dies of natural causes. But this didn't go well with John Gotti. Castellano always infuriated the upstart Capo Gotti, to the point that Gotti straight up had Castellano murdered in 1985. In 1992, things did not go well for Gotti. He was headed into a downfall, which was led by none other than Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano. And if you're wondering why Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano sounds so familiar, his daughter is Karen Gravano of the Mob Wives of MTV. Anyways, it was Sammy the Bull who had cooperated with the FBI. Now, it is said that because Gravano cooperated with the FBI, not only did it bring Gotti's downfall, but it also caused the downfalls of many top members of the Gambino family. Whoever was the head of the family until 2015 is unknown, but Frank Cali came into power in January 2015, and he remained in power until he was murdered outside his Staten Island home on March 13, 2019. Because of that, that was just a brief, history of what we're going to be talking about in, the upcoming events. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on with the origins, and I hope you guys do enjoy the rest of this video. The origins of the Gambino family was traced back to Palermo, Sicily. It was essentially a faction of a new transplanted mafioso by the name of Ignazio Lupo. When he and Giuseppe Murillo, who is his partner by business and marriage, were sent to prison in 1910 for a charge of counterfeiting, one of Lupo's chief captains, Salvatore Toto di Aquila, took over. Now, di Aquila was known to be a very influential man and immigrant from Palermo, Sicily as well. He joined the Lupo gang that was based in East Harlem. The Lupo Mano Nera gang was founded in the 1900s, also being one of the first Italian criminal gangs in New York. Lupo, being a partner of Murillo, helped Murillo in many business ventures, but Murillo was also the original Capo di Tutti Capi, aka Bosses of Bosses, a title that di Aquila would secretly covet. As time went on, more gangs and their leaders would go on to acknowledge Murillo as their boss of bosses. In 1906, di Aquila's name first appeared on police records for running a confidence scam. In 1910, Murillo and Lupo started to do counterfeiting, and this scam would lead to Giuseppe Murillo and Ignazio Lupo to being sentenced to 30 years in prison for that crime. With the bosses of bosses in prison, the family would be weakened. Thus, di Aquila made his move, using this opportunity to attain supreme dominance on what would become the Palermitani family, made of members from the Murillo crime family. Because he was able to obtain leadership, di Aquila used his own ties to other mafia leaders alike in the United States to create a new era of influence and connections to become a powerful force to be reckoned with in the state of New York. As was said before, in 1910, more gangs were beginning to pop up and try to assume dominance on areas already taken. In addition to the original Murillo gang in East Harlem and di Aquila's own growing gang, which is also in East Harlem but has been expanded into Little Italy in Manhattan's Lower East Side, Niccolo Cola Cicero ended up establishing a second gang of Sicilian mafiosi from the Castellammarese del Golfo, west of Palermo, Sicily. Alfred Migno went on to establish a third Sicilian gang that was based in Brooklyn. Gaetano Reina, who also happened to be a Murillo captain, broke away from the Bronx to form his own gang, and decided the Bronx area was infected with impurities. While all of this was going on, a new organization was being formed and was on the rise in South Brooklyn, and it was being led by Johnny Torrio and Frankie Yale. Finally, there was the Neapolitan Camorra gangs, and these two gangs were stationed on Coney Island and Navy Street in Brooklyn. Both groups were led by Pellegrino Marano and Alessandro Valero. The gang known as the Camorra led the assassination of Nicholas Murillo in 1916, but that would lead to a mistake that they didn't plan for. Di Aquila heard of the assassination and ended up forming an alliance with the Murillos and led a fight against the Camorra. The leaders, Marano and Valero, were arrested in 1917. The evidence was so well prepared that the judge sentenced both men to life imprisonment. This caused both Camorra gangs to disband because they didn't have leadership anymore. Di Aquila and the Cicero family took over the rackets that the gangs had in Brooklyn. Menino and his gang ended their family and became one with Di Aquila. As such, Di Aquila made Menino his first lieutenant. The Aquila was now in control of the largest and most influential Italian gang in the New York area. After this event, it soon became apparent that a former Murillo captain, Joe Masseria, was jealous and began to assert his influence on Little Italy in the Lower East Side. When the boss and his first lieutenant heard of this, De Aquila made it known that a newfound conflict was rising and would destroy the operations that De Aquila had there. To make this event worse, it was the beginning of Prohibition, which was fastly approaching. Prohibition in 1920 was meant to outlaw the production and sales of alcohol, and it was the great planning that gangs in New York began an extremely lucrative racket, which was an illegal one at that. By 1920, Giuseppe Joe the Boss Masseria was the only significant rival De Aquila had to contend with. You see, Masseria wanted to be the king of bosses. He started taking interest in the Murillo family's interests, and by the mid-1920s had amassed power and influence to rival De Aquila's. This was cause for an historic showdown between De Aquila and Masseria by the late 20s. In October 1928, we see the loss of Salvatore De Aquila, who was assassinated outside his own home by gunmen owned or ordered by Masseria. Masseria was about to be thrown into some big events that was now led by new boss of the family, former First Lieutenant Alfred Menino. Menino promoted his right-hand man, Steve Ferrigno, to First Lieutenant, and Menino was now in command of New York City's largest and most influential Sicilian gang. The Castellammarese War of 1930 was started between Masseria and Salvatore Marianzano. Marianzano was the new leader of Colas Chiro's Castellammarese gang for control of the Italian-American organized crime in New York. Boss Menino and Ferrigno were both casualties of this war. They led an attempt assassination on Masseria on November 5, 1930. Masseria would later be murdered in a restaurant by several members of his own gang. He came to see Masseria as an embarrassment and deflected to Marianzano in 1931 of April. This caused Marianzano to declare himself the bosses of all bosses and had all gangs to become reorganized into the 5 families. Frank Castellammarese was later appointed to head the old De Aquila Menino gang that was designated as one of New York's new 5 families. In 1931 of September, a squad of killers would assassinate Marianzano while he was in his office. Charlie Lucky Luciano led both hits and was the only one to benefit from those hits. He kept the 5 families as they were, but added a commission to mediate any and all disputes, as well as prevent any more warfare between gangs. After this commission was started, Castellammarese was replaced by Vincent Mangano as head of the De Aquila Menino gang, now being called the Mangano crime family. Mangano received a seat in the commission as well. Casa Nostra would lead into a new modern era. 2 members of the Mangano family by the names of Joseph Biondo was named as the consigliere and Albert Anastasia as underboss. Vincent Mangano made sure the old war traditions of honor, respect, and dignity would remain in place. Despite this, Mangano was still somewhat more forward-looking than either Masseria or Marianzano. Because of the Prohibition era, the family did lose a lot of money, so Vincent ended up leading them into the world of extortion, union racketeering, illegal gambling events, which included horse betting, running numbers, and lotteries. Believing ostensibly in American values, Mangano established a club known as the City Democratic Club, which was really a front for his underground gang, Murder, Inc. That gang was notoriously known for having and using Jewish hitmen who contract killings for the Cosa Nostra around the nation. The gang was led by none other than Albert Anastasia, who went on to become the Lord High Executioner, which also made him very popular. Boss Mangano would go on to have close ties with Emil Camarda, a vice president of the International Longshoremen's Association. Mangano and his family had complete control of the Manhattan and Brooklyn waterfronts through the ILA. From 1932 and onward, president of the local chapter 1814 was Anthony Tony Anastasio, who was Albert's younger brother but had also kept the original family name. Anastasio earned the family millions in kickbacks and payoffs into the family's coffers. If Anastasio wanted something and he had to have it, he would mention Albert's name to make a point, and was given that item or information. He knew the family would back him. The waterfront of Brooklyn was Tough Tony's bailiwick for 30 years. It was around this time that an associate by the name of Carlo Gambino, who would be and was promoted within the Mangano family, and Gambino's cousin, Paul Castellano, would become an underboss in the future. For 20 years, Anastasia and Mangano worked together, and even though they were best friends, they had conflicts that were normal. But sometimes those conflicts would become physical. Vincent Mangano was starting to feel uncomfortable around Anastasia and his close ties with Lucky Luciano, Frank Costello, Joseph Bonanno, and other top mobsters outside the family. Mangano made sure that Anastasia knew that he was jealous of Anastasia's strong power base with Murder, Inc. and the waterfront. Mangano would disappear in April 1951, and his brother Philip would be found dead. Not one person was charged with the brothers' deaths, and because Vincent's body was never found, authorities were said to believe that Anastasia committed the murders, and with that, it was generally believed by the public as well. Anastasia was confronted by the commission to admit his guilt that he committed the murders, and he refused to. However, he claimed that Mangano was planning to murder him. Anastasia was already running the family in Mangano's absence, and the commission was said to be intimidated by Anastasia himself. Frank Costello, boss of the Luciano crime family, ended up submitting his support to confirm Anastasia as the new head of the family, now known as the Anastasia crime family. Carlo Gambino, a wily character in his own way, quickly realized he wanted leadership of his own, managed to become Castellammarese. Murder, Inc.'s former boss went on to instill fear throughout the families. With Costello now being an ally of his, the new boss was joining control of the commission. This caused the bitterness of Vito Genovese, a rival of Costello and former underboss of Lucky Luciano, to swell. Since 1946, Vito had been planning to kick Costello out so he could become boss of the family. Though he was scheming, Vito wasn't powerful enough to face Anastasia. Because of the boss's brutal actions, many started moving towards the favor of removal. One of these actions was Anastasia's command to take out a Brooklyn man by the name of Arnold Schuster, who aided in the capture of a bank robber by the name of Willie Sutton. The New York families were outraged by the fact that Anastasia wanted his gratuitous killing to happen. It even got a public furor. Luciano's associate, Mayor Lansky, was soon alienated because of Anastasia, who opened casinos in Cuba just so he can compete with Lansky's. This made Vinci make right with Lansky. In turn, they offered Carlo Gambino a chance to become boss. In 1957, Frank Costello managed to escape a Vinci organized assassination, with minor injuries and him resigning as boss. But as an act of revenge, this caused Costello to align with Anastasia and conspire to regain power. To make sure that this wasn't going to happen, they then decided to kill Anastasia. Anastasia would go on to be murdered on October 25, 1957, after several masked gunmen came into the shop while Anastasia was in the barber chair. He tried to lunge at his killers, but hit the wall mirror instead. Historians believe Capo regime Joseph Biondo was ordered by Gambino himself to kill Albert Anastasia, so Biondo hired gunmen who wanted the contract. The gunmen were led by Stephen Armone and Stephen Gramento. With this rival dead, the family would go on to be known as the Gambino crime family, with Carlo as the head. Biondo was appointed as underboss, but was replaced by Anillo Della Croce in 1965. Gambino and Luciano allegedly participated with a drug dealer of Puerto Rican descent to falsely implicate Vinci in a drug deal. They paid the man $100,000. Vinci would only serve 10 years of a 15-year sentence before dying in federal prison in 1969. Boss Gambino built the family into being the most powerful family in the United States. Meyer Lansky's offshore gaming house even helped Gambino turn them into a lucrative business for Cuba and the Bahamas within the Casa Nostra. As the years went by, 1964 would be the year that Joseph Joe Bananas Bonanno, leader of the Bonanno crime family, would conspire a plot to kill Gambino and his many friends and allies. And he was going to make sure Joseph Magliocco, head of the Profaci crime family, would help him out. They entrusted the job to Joseph Colombo, who turned around and told Gambino, who also led the commission, about the plot. Being forced to resign, Magliocco left as head of the Profaci crime family, but Bonanno left back to New York, or should I say fled back to New York. From then on, Gambino was not the most powerful leader of the five families. In 1971, we saw Gambino try and execute the failed assassination attempt on Colombo, who became paralyzed. During the days of the Italian-American Unity Day, medicine wasn't as advanced in those days compared to today. Colombo would live out his days paralyzed. Sadly, Colombo ended up passing away in 1978. It was told through various sources that Colombo had to die due to his high-profile status, which Gambino admitted that it was annoying. In 1972, with the leader of the Vinci ordered to be killed by Gambino, Frank Funzi Thierry would be appointed the new head, also by Gambino himself. The leader before Thierry, who was named Thomas Eboli, failed to repay $3 million to Gambino, but there were so many others who saw how erratic that Thierry was as a boss that they believed he was killed by his own family. Under the influence of Gambino, the family started to go into the construction industry. That meant they would become the behind-the-scenes controllers of the Teamsters Local 282. This team had strong access control to almost all building materials, but because of that, it meant all construction projects about the city of New York was to grind to a hard stop. In 1976, news of Carlo Gambino's death was told to the families and media. He died of natural causes. Like other leaders before him, he appointed Castellano to be leader, not Gambino's underboss Della Croce. This was because Della Croce was in prison for tax evasion and therefore unable to contest the new leader. Gambino personally believed that Castellano would lead the family to benefit from Castellano's focus on white-collar businesses. With Castellano as its leader, it was confirmed at a meeting in November. To make amends with Della Croce, Castellano offered to have Della Croce remain as underboss with the promise of running Cosa Nostra's activities like extortion, robbery, and loan sharking. Because of this deal, and with Della Croce accepting, the Gambino family ended up being split into two rival factions. Now trust me, as far as I can tell, Castellano had his enemies, just like everyone else, with Castellano trying to kill a couple here and there, but the worst rival he was to contend with was John Gotti. Yeah, that John Gotti. Gotti made sure he was Castellano's #1 rival/enemy, but it was even more upsetting to find out that Gotti was Della Croce's protege. Gotti made Castellano's life a living hell, with everything ranging from his leadership to making it heard that he found Castellano to be isolated and greedy. Gotti figured that since Castellano didn't have street cred, that it was okay to continue disrespecting Castellano. Because of the events that were going on, Gotti made sure that Castellano was banned from the lucrative trading of drug dealing and on the expansion of the trade. Della Croce ended up dying in December of 1985. Cancer overtook his body at a fast succession. Castellano appointed Bellotti as underboss and Thomas Gambino as sole acting boss, with plans to disband Gotti's group. Infuriated with this information, Gotti planned to kill his boss. On the evening of December 16, 1985, a meeting took place. Castellano and several other Gambino mobsters were at the Sparks Steakhouse. Gotti ordered the killings of the boss and underboss, and Gotti then sat in the car of Gravano and watched with Gravano himself as the hit took place, causing him to laugh and smile as the screams of both could be heard. This did not sit well at all with the leaders of the mob of the families. They were so enraged by Gotti and his high profile. Well, to be honest, he made #1 on the disapproval list of Genovese crime family boss Vincent Chin Gigante. Gigante was a former Castellano ally. Gigante and the Lucchese boss Anthony Carrillo plotted to have Gotti murdered. The contract was given to his top two members, Vic Amuso and Gaspar Casso. March 1986 to August 1986 were the events of the Yugo deciding not to testify against Gotti, as well as the death of Di Ciccio, who was in his car when it was bombed after he had visited Castellano loyalist James Fiala. It also had Gotti, his brother, and other members arrested and facing a judge. In March 1987, Gotti and his co-defendants were acquitted of all charges. 5 years later, Pape convicted of obstruction of justice for his part and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Years continued to go by, and with that, numerous events happened, with the latest event happening in December of 2019 on the 5th. Not much else has been heard or mentioned since then, but what remains is that fear of you messing with this family and you may end up disappearing. And on that note, I hope you enjoyed the video. Again, my name is Brenna Victoria. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for the next new video. Have a great evening, afternoon, or morning. Good night.